Steven, how are you doing? It looks like you're somewhere in a desert storm in Texas right now,
I'm singing in the rain today. I'm back home in Miami Beach here, but it is definitely not sunny Miami Beach today. It's
yeah,
rainy.
yeah. It's a little rainy out here in Leipzig too, but that's what you kind of expect from Eastern Germany, Eastern Europe. So it is what it is. All right, let's get into it. Last week on Signal, we walked through the Pentagon AI story, the deal that was struck, the deal that was refused, and what happened to both companies as a result. This week, we're not going to revisit the events. We're going to look at the people. Dario Amodei, Sam Altman, and Alex Karp all faced the same external pressure in the same month. The government, a defense contract, a binary choice. And they responded in completely different ways. That's not coincidence, it's character. And character, especially under pressure, is what leadership actually is. So today's episode is a character study. We'll go through each of them, who they are, where they came from, and what their public behavior in that moment reveals about how they lead. Not just in a crisis, but overall. Because Stephen and I spent a lot of time on this show talking about career decisions and leadership principles. Today we have 3 living case studies with receipts. Stephen, before we get into each person in detail, I want to sort of set the frame. When you think about how a leader behaves under genuine pressure, not just PR pressure, but genuine legacy defining decisions to be made with real cost, real consequence pressure sort of things, what do you think it reveals that normal operation or the daily business just cannot show you?
Well, I mean, we've seen some pretty amazing times in technology, for instance, where there are scandals. Like go back to the Facebook related privacy and manipulation of user data. And, kind of how these tech CEOs like Zuckerberg have to deal with that. It becomes a major, political, social, economic issue of which they have to quickly, assess the situation, instill a level of confidence for the investors, for the public. I think this is where the CEO it's a balancing act because they have principles themselves. They have opinions, but they're not trying to make those opinions overly expressive in how they communicate. They're trying to kind of do the 50-50, the middle of the road, really kind of politically and socially in order to get the points across. The best CEOs have a way of like delivering the bad news in a way, whether it's a bad quarter or it's a bad year. They have a way of conveying some optimism and also really accepting when things are not going well. So the best ones out there I've seen can speak to those downtimes, can speak to the issues, can speak to the scandals. Some scandals are hard to walk away from, but like the example I gave, Zuck was able to kind of smooth the waters over multiple times. Jack Dorsey at Twitter, and there's just multiple CEOs that I could think of that made it through the storm, no pun intended. But they do it because they can express themselves in a way, and they can also build confidence internally. Not everybody's going to be on the same side of these issues. You have to, it has to be like an 80-20 message. Like, look, guys, we're here to do X, Y, and Z. We try every day to get up and do the very best. And here's what I say is, I define as the best for our company, for our culture, for society. The good CEOs can kind of encapsulate that. They know they're not going to please 100% of the people 100% of the time.
Yeah. I mean, we had a couple of things happening over the last week and a half where Zuckerberg and then also Sam Altman had to make some difficult decisions with Zuckerberg shutting down Metaverse, which I think took a total of $80 billion in investment just to be shut down after 5 years. And then OpenAI decided to shut down Sora, the video AI creation platform, which also has had quite a bit of investment into it. Probably not as
Yeah.
much as 80 billion for Metaverse, but still it's something where maybe even you have to figure out, to what extent are my morals as an individual coming through, and to what extent do I defend the company as an institution and maybe overrule the ideas I have for myself and for what I wanted to be defined as a person in that case. But let's start with Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, and let's look at his background. He's a PhD in physics and computational biology from Princeton. He spent time at Baidu and Google Brain before joining OpenAI in 2016. At OpenAI, he rose to VP of research and was one of the key figures behind GPT-2 and 3, the foundational models that eventually then turned into ChatGPT. He left in 2020, and that's a statement that's usually tied together to him leaving ChatGPT OpenAI back then is what I really appreciate about him. He didn't leave over a salary dispute or because he couldn't get to the next ladder in the career chain, but because he said, and I'm paraphrasing, it's incredibly unproductive to try and argue with someone else's vision. So he didn't, and he left and built his own company. Anthropic was structured from day one around things like safety as a founding design principle, not a feature. Their technical contribution is something called a constitutional AI, a method for embedding a set of principles directly into how the model evaluates its own outputs. It was published in 2022 of December, the same week ChatGPT launched. Nobody read it that week, but it's arguably the most important thing Anthropic has produced. We talked about the Pentagon deal. We talked about the situation around that after the public decision from Anthropic to back out of that deal with the Pentagon. Their run rate revenue was around $14 billion prior, and then rose up to $19 billion about a week after, I believe. Claude went in the number one free user app store in the Apple App Store. So the market responded positively as we talked about last time. And we're going to look at a few more keys here, but just to kick this off, Stephen, you've worked with quite a few executives over your career. To your experience, what does it look like to an organizational extent when the company's stated values are the real operating constraints versus when they're sort of, aspirational? And is Anthropic's response here consistent with that kind of culture of being, turning your stated values into your operating constraints and not making them as sort of aspirational goals?
I really think that Dario is one of those that's talking the talk and walking the walk. I really believe that. I think that, he decides he wants to make a better version of a company he came from. He starts his own firm. He surrounds himself by like-minded people. They have a foundational thesis as to how they're going to operate, becomes the mission and culture of the way they do business. The Pentagon deal is an expression of him standing his ground. I think that's a great reflection on principle. He wants to make a better company that protects people's data, that has guardrails. He's, foundational security message. To me, I look at this is the kind of leader who is literally trying to express what he thinks, what he believes, how he feels, his passion for this particular area, and how it should be effectively rolled out, and how this
Right.
message should be rolled out. So he's one of those that likely, he gets in every day, and he's, what he says is what he does. And there's no waffling here. And I think, he's in a incredibly privileged situation too. He's in a part of the sector in the particular industry that he's in that has so much influence and so much investment and so many eyeballs on it. So he's sitting in a prime position now to fulfill his dream, but also to help drive a company to success. And so I look at him as somebody who's in a very fortunate position. He's obviously very skillful, very talented, bright person, has a great pedigree, has a great history and legacy already. So he's doing things the way he wants them done, based on he believes in. He's found like-minded people who will rally around him. He probably has like-minded investors as well, which is actually something that's very rare.
Yeah.
That's part of the chemistry match that you need when you are an entrepreneur, is find the right investors. These people are going to stick with him, and the bet is paying off.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What you said, like-minded people, like-minded investors. He initially started out with a total of initial funding of $124 million. He took 14 of his colleagues from OpenAI with him to start Anthropic, including his sister, Daniela, who originally was the VP of safety at OpenAI before she then joined him at Anthropic. One thing I can relate to a lot with Amodei is sort of his concern that a technology as big and as influential in our daily lives and future as this. The decisions regarding that its future are being made by a few companies, by a few people,
Mhm.
which I have a lot of appreciation for. I'm always up for, we talked about OpenClaw last week. I'm always up for open source models where the people have the biggest influence, sort of the intelligence of the many and the idiocracy of the individual, sort of thing. And then you also, in terms of somewhat publicity, there was a leak, or a leak. I don't. You sometimes when there's leaks in politics and business, you wonder, are they really like leaked? Somebody
Leaks
just
are intentional. No,
or is it
leaks are
an
always
intentional
intentional.
leak?
Yeah.
Exactly. And when Sam Altman published a statement concerning the new deal with OpenAI and the Pentagon, where he said, we're sort of drawing the same red lines as Anthropic and in terms of surveillance and autonomous weapons and stuff like that. Amodei leaked an internal memo. As you said, they're always intentional. He called OpenAI's messaging around the Pentagon's deal straight up lies and
Yep.
mendacious,
Yep.
which there's always nuances to if it's a public statement or a leaked memo or a direct message to Sam Altman. In this case, it was a very straight way of communicating how he felt about what Altman did. And so I have a lot of appreciation for him in terms of his concern with this technology and the future of it being in the hands of a few instead of sort of it being democratized in a way. So let's move
Proof is
on
in the
to
pudding. Proof is in the pudding. Let's watch and see what
exactly.
happens over the next 2, 3 years with Dario there, and see if he continues to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, let's move into the next guy, Sam Altman. Sam Altman became CEO of OpenAI in 2019. Before that, he ran a company, Y Combinator, the most influential startup accelerator in Silicon Valley, for 5 years. His background isn't research; it's in product fundraising and growth. He's the person who turned OpenAI from a research lab into a product company, and then into one of the most valuable private companies on earth. OpenAI's last reported valuation was around $300 billion with a pending IPO. Altman is also one of the most publicly visible CEOs in the tech industry, next to the NVIDIA guy, probably. He has deliberately positioned himself as a statesman of AI, testifying before Congress, advocating for international coordination, warning about existential risks. He plays the role of the responsible actor at scale, or at least he's trying to. What happened during the Pentagon episode exposed the tension in that position. On February 26th, Altman sent an all-staff message at OpenAI saying the company shared Anthropic's red lines: no mass surveillance, no autonomous weapons without human oversight. He was explicit about it. His employees were watching. Some had already signed an open letter supporting Anthropic's stance. The next day, Altman was negotiating his own deal with the Pentagon. On February 28th, the day after Anthropic was blacklisted, OpenAI announced it had signed the contract. The backlash was immediate. ChatGPT uninstalls spiked over 295% that day. OpenAI's own robotics lead resigned over it. On Monday, Altman posted publicly that the deal was, quote, opportunistic and sloppy. He acknowledged he shouldn't have rushed it. He then renegotiated the terms to add explicit surveillance language.
Mm.
Stephen, Altman's situation is actually pretty common at scale to extent, I'd say. The public position and the operational reality don't perfectly align. How do you think about leading through that kind of contradiction? And what do you think the public walkback tells us about his leadership style, where it's not, I'm going to make a decision, I'm going to stick with it, but I'm going to make a decision, I'm going to call it opportunistic and sloppy, and then backtrack, backwalk from it.
Well, it feels like he's making excuses, which, as a leader, you got to stick to your guns. Like, you made a decision, you got to see it through. You don't apologize, never apologize for your decisions. I mean, you look, there's a lot of investment, a lot of strategic investors and institutional equity investors behind this OpenAI thing. It's, what have they taken? How much in investment? A couple $100 million. I mean, it's a massive amount of investment, right? So it continues to grow. And as this investment, it's more than a couple hundred, sorry, it's like billions of dollars of
Yeah.
investment, right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
they've got all the giants behind them, right? I correct myself. So, like, let's not kid ourselves. There are a lot of people behind Sam Altman that want to see this thing be a commercial success. And I mean, and he has an opportunity to do so. He apologizes and walks back a decision he makes because he feels a political pressure. He feels the heat from
Mhm.
within, he feels the heat from on the outside. As a leader, you've got to, be able to stand by your decisions and be able to express why that decision was being made. Let's be honest. He wanted that business. He was willing to make those sacrifices. And he should not apologize for trying to drive revenue and bookings for a company that is a fledgling AI company that has a huge opportunity in this industry. He
Mhm.
shouldn't be apologetic about it. And by the way, I don't think that this company was founded by a church or founded by a political organization that is against working on military I don't think there's no moral obligation for this company. I'm sorry. If Dario wants to stand up and say we are going to be the safer, better, privacy centric AI company, and he lives that way in his day to day, and his company produces what they say, that's different. But Sam Altman never took an oath to honor your privacy. He never took an oath to not work with the military. And by
Yeah.
the way, I have a feeling that this is a little bit of a no kings protest going on here, not by Sam, but by his people. I read in the article there about how 120 of those snot-nosed Silicon Valley tech nerds decided they want to walk out. And they said they're going to do a walkout. It sounds a lot like a protest to me. Like, we don't believe in this deal because we're working with the side that we don't, we agree with. And I feel like if it was a different administration, they would look the other way. Because I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest, in Obama's administration targeted civilians on the battlefield using drones, and they had AI then. It was just more, machine learning oriented. But I was saying, like, it flashed back 10, 15 years, and I think there would be a different administration and there'd be a different Pentagon in place.
Yeah.
Would they say they walk out? I don't know.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and I imagine that if it was a Democrat president that wouldn't be as controversial as Donald Trump, then it might have been a different story for sure. I just I do think in this case when it comes to the important, I really believe important conversations we're having publicly about what we want AI to do and what we don't want AI to do, this isn't a scenario where you can just dip your foot in the pool. You either have
Right.
to be fully submerged or you're staying out of it. The third guy we're going to talk about here, Alex Karp, doesn't give a flying fuck. He just does what he does and stays out of public. But Sam Altman sits before Congress with his puppy eyes, just, oh, we don't want no harm. We just want you to use as many tokens a day and just build your vibe coding and talk to them. And then in this case, if that's what you're doing and then not sticking with your decision but backpedaling because you feel bad about it or just got the numbers reports and we're losing that many customers, then I don't
It
think that's
feels
a very
to
good
me if
look.
No, it feels like Zuckerberg to me. It feels like Facebook. Like, oh, let's connect all the people in the world and reconnect people in the world and make, kumbaya. And then in the back end, it's all about monetization. It's the same
Yeah.
shit over with Sam Altman. He's
Yeah.
he's driving monetization. He's taking this Pentagon deal because it's a huge opportunity for the company. I mean, it would be remiss of him as a CEO not to consider working with the government, the biggest funder of AI, the biggest customer of AI. That'd be really foolish now, wouldn't it? But at the same time, on his platform, he is working feverishly to commercialize and monetize your prompts. So he's no different than Zuckerberg and Facebook serving up ads as you scroll through your, high school rev. I
Yeah.
really think that people get all worked up and start to impose their political and social agendas on public company or a private company that's trying to IPO to become public. You don't like OpenAI? Uninstall it. You don't like, you like Claude? Install it.
Yeah.
You've got the choice, but
I believe yeah.
don't cry me
I
a river on this one.
I mean, we talked about it last time where there's companies that have such a huge market share that if you think about the product, you don't think about the original name of the product, you think about the company's name, like Kleenex, like
Yes.
Swiffer, like Nike, not Nike, but Coca-Cola. You don't
Let's
call
do
it
it.
Pepsi, you just call it fake Coke. Yeah, exactly. So in this case, for a long time, probably ever since they launched, ChatGPT was ChatGPT. That was the AI models we knew and that we used, and everybody sort of did. Even your grandma had OpenAI on their phone. And then this happened, and now all of a sudden everybody's loving those new skills for Claude and agents, and everybody's doing everything. And
Let's not forget this shit came out in 2023.
yeah,
3 years into this experiment, and
and now
we're
we're
already
figuring it
picking
out.
sides. Yeah.
Exactly. And we said it last time, we're loving the dynamic around just, the user can look at the market, whatever fits them the best, they'll use. And if they don't like it, the morals behind it, the product, just uninstall it.
Walk away.
I really like the comparison to Zuckerberg because he also seems like this submissive, puppy-eyed,
Loves to get in front of
rollover,
Congress.
loves to get public and just cry and
And
moan about how
guy is a
deeply he cares about
jerk.
people. Yeah.
This is
I
a guy who's like, no walls, no borders. And he puts like an 11-mile barrier around his
yeah,
house in Maui. He's such a
yeah,
joke. He's such a
yeah.
joke.
And so I
He doesn't represent what he says one thing and he does another. He doesn't really represent any truth. He'll just do whatever it takes to make the billions of dollars that he makes every second, you know.
yeah,
He
yeah,
has no integrity.
and so
And
I
Sam's
don't
on the
I'm
way.
Yeah, and I don't feel bad for him at all having the effects of what he did. I think it's helping consumers to see the true colors of OpenAI and especially their CEO, which not necessarily is going to change the product or
Right.
the usefulness of it, but it's going to shed an actual light as to even no matter how submissive their CEO looks, they're still having very economic interests in their products when it comes to any business case, really, from governments to just whatever product you use on your phone or for your college degree to fake your way to make it, sort of thing. But the third person is, to me, the most interesting guy in this panel because of his background. And I'm talking about Alex Karp. Alex Karp is the CEO of Palantir, the company he co-founded with Peter Thiel in 2003. He has a bachelor's from Haverford College,
Haverford, PA.
law degree from Stanford, and a PhD in social theory from Goethe University in Frankfurt, where he studied under the philosopher Jürgen Habermas, who unfortunately passed away very recently, but was considered the most meaningful philosopher in our current times. He has led Palantir since before it had a product. Palantir builds data and analytics software primarily for government and defense clients. Its flagship government product, called Gotham, is used across U.S. intelligence agencies, the military, and law enforcement. The company has contracts with the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Defense, and ICE. It has also worked with the Israeli military and the Ukrainian government. Palantir's current market cap is in the range of $250 to $300 billion. Karp is the odd one out in this comparison, and deliberately so. He has been publicly, I'm going to butcher this word, contemptuous of Silicon Valley's reluctance to work with the defense institutions. He has called it moral cowardice. He's written about it in a book, The Technological Republic, published last year, where he argues that Western technologies companies have an obligation to support the democratic institutions that made their success possible. When the Pentagon episode happened, Karp's company wasn't in it because Palantir's position was already long established. So he has an arguable, I mean, you can, in Altman's case, you can argue, he's from the sort of the business development side. He has product experience, he has growth experience,
Hmm.
and then Amodei has some sort of tech background, computational
Yeah.
biology. And then
Scientific.
you have Karp, who has a law degree, and then who has a social theory degree, I believe it was, from a incredibly influential philosopher as one of his main professors. And I read into a story about Alex Karp where I tried to figure out what was sort of the motives going into the Palantir project, because I'd see Peter Thiel and then Alex Karp on two very different ends of the spectrum, because Peter Thiel is usually located as sort of these libertarians that are now in support of Donald Trump, tied to J.D. Vance, all this stuff.
Mhm.
where Karp, and with his background, wouldn't necessarily be squeezed into that. I think it was at the Daily. They argued that one of the key experiences that led to then Palantir being founded in cooperation with Alex Karp was 9/11 2001, where in the hindsight of that horrific event, people figured out that a lot of different stations, a lot of different police stations, government institutions had information that could have led to stopping this horrendous thing from happening, but they just weren't able to tie that together because of a missing sort of
No
interlinked
centralized data
stations.
store,
Exactly.
no data repository, centralized data,
Exactly. And so that
secure
was
data.
sort of the idea behind it, to build a platform that brings a lot of data together to be able to foresee things and stop them from happening, with the argument of you have to do something about mass migration, because if you don't, it's just breeding ground for far right nationalists to just go in with their very crazy theses and take over a large amount of the population, because they're thinking the government is not doing anything, yada yada yada. You could spin 100 things into this. So Stephen Karp is a genuinely hard character to play. He's a self-described progressive who runs one of the largest defense contractors in the country. He's philosophically trained and runs a surveillance company. Where do you land? Do you land on the clarity as integrity versus clarity as permission to do whatever question? And does Karp's track record support one reading over the other?
I think Karp is unapologetic in the sense that he has a core thesis in security and safety of people, not data. And I think he's unapologetic in the way he operates and how he's acted as a leader. He's very deterministic. He has, if anybody is walking the walk and talking the talk of his talk track, he is definitely following what he says. Again, more similar to Dario than Sam. I also don't see, I think that Alex Karp has figured out how to work with either administration. And that example I gave earlier with respect to targeting on the battlefield with Obama, that was done with Palantir. So Palantir, and Alex will work with either administration. He doesn't choose red over blue or blue over red. He chooses green.
Mm-hmm.
He chooses
Mm-hmm.
the color of money. And he
Mm-hmm.
understands that administrations come and go. He understands that policy will, will start in one administration, it'll modify in the next, it'll get rewritten in the next, and the next, and the next. He's in it for the long haul. He believes
Mm-hmm.
in government influence in our lives for primarily for the purpose of safety and defense. And then he also has principles around, securing and communicating sensitive data. So he's been able to do that with his product, his platform. And there's a lot of distrust of that company though. And but he doesn't waver. That's what I mean about him being unapologetic.
Yeah. Yeah.
He doesn't waver. I mean, I've seen him in TED Talks, I've seen him in interviews and panels. He does not, other than the time he kind of looks a little bit coked out, but like he does not waver in his thesis around what the company does, what they stand for, and why they are here to help the government be a success. So, and of course, he's not only been influential in military and defense, he's also become very influential in other sectors as well, because I think serious businesses and serious industries are looking at his technology as a way to, unite information, protect information, as well as create AI models that can transform their businesses. So I think this is a guy who understands how serious the job is. He understands that political administrations change every 4 years, 2 to 4
Mm-hmm.
years in many cases. And he understands the dynamics of the long haul working with governments and industry, and that it doesn't matter who the president is or who the Senate leader is or who the next CEO of the company you're selling to is. He understands longevity. And I think that's very different. And you can see it from his operation. He's been in business for well over 2 decades. Sam doesn't get it. Sam's, flashing, we'll call him flash in the pan, Sam, because he is all about, saying whatever needs to be said, doing whatever needs to be done in order to get the signing on the dotted line. He doesn't appear to have any fortitude, or he doesn't have any kind of deep testament, if you will, on how
Yeah,
he
he's like a
operates.
flag in the wind. He just goes wherever
Yeah.
the wind blows. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think I saw him blowing by me. Yeah. The other guy, Dario, obviously he sticks by his guns as well. He's very so maybe he's a different dimension of a carp. He's just more principled and he's more open about what he cares about, and then he operates within that envelope. Carp is very much about driving the business, and I think that's probably Thiel's influence as well, because Thiel is all very, very focused on the success and the profitability of the company, being, somebody who's had tremendous success himself as not only an entrepreneur, but as an investor. I mean, this is like the difference between the big boys and babies. I mean, Karp is a big boy and he works in a big boy world. Sam's still playing in kindergarten with his toys. Just so happens, he goes to a very well-funded Leering center at which he can play with the best of toys that mommy and daddy bought for him, because he has the endless amount of, checking account balance inside the checkbook of Silicon Valley National Bank. So he can just do whatever he wants because
Mm-hmm.
there's an open blank check, and it's
Mm-hmm.
funded by the good people of Nvidia and Microsoft and Facebook and all the other wonderful people who live in that zip code. The idea, though, is that they're very different leaders and they're very different companies, and they're going to have very different outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Question based on everything we've been through today, we talked about today. Who do you think built the most durable kind of company, and what does that sort of tell us about the relationship between personal clarity and institutional trust? I think I know the answer, but shoot.
I think I think Dario has the beginnings of an amazing opportunity with Claude. I think he could literally tip the balance for the industry. And just like we talked about a couple episodes ago, it's leading with those core principles and then doing what you say and do what you do. And I think he has a great opportunity with Claude. And then with Anthropic rather. And then I think Karp with, Palantir. I'd say they're both acting as real CEOs.
Mm-hmm.
They're leading is dancing on a very delicate, very thin line as far as, I'm sure there's a lot of pressure. There's probably, I know that he's seen as being sort of like, kind of negative force, almost like, the dark side of
Yeah.
the tech industry. So he probably has to contend with that. But, the best CEOs, they figure it out. They go, no one's going to like me, but I'm
Yeah.
here to succeed. I'm here to drive this business. So I think Karp has the longevity, as I said earlier. I think he definitely is focused on the success of that business. I want to remind you and everybody else. I mean, these are businesses that are meant to drive profit. They are
Yeah.
not nonprofits. And
Yeah.
the moment that we think that these companies are nonprofits and that they are supposed to have some moral character and supposed to act and operate in some moral way, business is not moral by design. It is
Mm-hmm.
not.
Yeah.
Read Milton Friedman. Read Milton Friedman
Yeah.
and come back and let's have this discussion, because businesses are not designed to be moral. That's not what they
Mm-hmm.
do. They have to follow the law. They can't have sweatshops and child labor. These are all things that these things make sense. These are good
Mm-hmm.
ideas. You don't do certain things, but they can't have side deals and deal with sanctioned governments. These are all laws that they have to abide by. But like if they operate within the four walls of the law, and they are communicating their
Mm-hmm.
the company's mission and goals, they're honest in the way they operate, they're honest to themselves, they're honest to the public. Again,
Yeah.
I'd rather have a carp who tells me what his number one goal is, which is to drive the company's success and work with the government, and know that the government is a top partner of his and that the government does surveillance. Let's just be honest. The government does surveillance and he provides the technology to do that surveillance. And it does it very well. And it keeps people very safe. I would rather work with a guy like that who is open and out in front with all those things than a guy like Altman, who's sort of like, today I'm going to be your buddy. I'm going to be your privacy friend. Tomorrow I'm going to put ads in your prompts, you know, and I'm going to go hang out with Zuckerberg in, Hawaii, in his, his mega mansion behind his 11-mile wall.
Who do you think is going to be big and little spoon if they ever get together, Zuck and Altman?
I don't know.
They'll probably go
Zuck is
50-50. just
I
to,
think they're equal opportunity. I think they're
yeah,
equal opportunity in their, cuck
and
nature.
everything. All right. Well, it was a beautiful episode from Signal. Thank you all so much for listening. Stephen, as always, the last words are reserved for you.
Well, I'm thankful that I live in a country which I can make these statements openly and honestly about what I feel. And I'm also thankful for these leaders, these three guys who are very different, who are all trying to drive in a similar industry, in a similar segment of technology. There are always opportunities as an observer, as a learner of, a student, if you will, of business. There's an opportunity to look at these CEOs, their styles, their approaches, the decisions they make, and you can take so much from these. You don't have to take one over the other. That's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
talking through the segment. Oh, it's Dario. It's a little bit of Sam. It's maybe a lot of Karp, in my opinion, as far as how he operates. But you can learn from all of these leaders. That's the wonderful thing about it. We live in an age in which information is served in real time. There are
Mm-hmm.
receipts, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
We can learn so much. We can frame and make our own decisions based on what we read and what we see and what we hear. We don't have to sort of like, take a one dimensional view or one dimensional take on information. We can literally inspect it, interrogate it. We can make our own decisions. So I'm thankful as always for that. And I like to learn from these CEOs because
Mm-hmm.
all of them have something to offer business leaders as they grow up in the industries that they serve. And we're only going to look back at this in 5, 10 years. And we're going to like say we were right or we're wrong or we're kind of right, but we're so blessed to be at a time where there are so many great companies and such an exciting industry and so many great leaders out there to be able to emulate. So that I'm very thankful for.
Absolutely. Stephen, have a great week.
You too, Joel. Take care, my friend.